Ning, have we accepted everyone that is waiting in the lobby?
Yes, we have
Yes.
bypassed them, so they can just come in.
They can just come in. Very good.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, with this, very good morning, good evening, good afternoon. We have participants registered from 31 countries around the world, and so I think any of these greetings will apply. My name is Mia Mikic. I coordinate Asia Pacific Research and Training Network on Trade, ARTNeT. It was established 16 years ago by United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific and International Development Research Center of Canada, with the aim to boost evidence or to improve evidence-based policy making in the developing countries of Asia Pacific through building the capacity in those countries to do solid, high-quality research. And so the part of or one of the very important pillars of the network was to share the knowledge among the institutions and with other partners. So we had always had ARTNeT seminar series. And that series had to actually convert to the webinars, given the situations that we are in this year. And so, speaking about this year, I think even though we have experienced some changes in globalization, evolution since the global financial crisis, COVID-19 pandemic, and the responses of governments to the pandemic caused quite a bit of issues with respect to the functioning and operations of international production networks, value chains, etc. And so we definitely, have a topic of interest and relevance in front of us. We are particularly excited that we host today two speakers from University of California, San Diego, Professor Hyoduk Shin and Ms. Helen Wang. We have shared some biodata of the speakers. The CVs are too rich for me to speak about here, but just to introduce them very briefly, Professor Shin, before joining Reddy School of UCSD, was at Northwestern University and comes with the degrees from Stanford and University of Chicago. And then Ms. Helen Wang has, proven record in supply chain strategy and innovation that she honed through long careers in Apple, in Google, in Foxconn. I think I also would like to recognize the presence in the webinar of Mr. Jimmy Anglesaria, who is the founder of the Institute of Supply Chain Excellence and Innovation at the university. And that institute is actually a house for this very exciting project that Shin and Helen will be talking about, post-globalization movement. We are excited to hear about the project because it combines the approach that ARTNeT has been following all the time, which is a multi-stakeholder input seeking from the academia, from young and old, from the industry experts, and of course, from the policymakers. What is very intriguing is the promise of this project is to solve real-world problems with complex projects and measure our success by predicting industry movements and emerging trends within the supply and value chains. And I think this is exactly what we are interested in hearing, not so much about the diagnosis of the problems, we are very much aware of those, but really how we look at the future solution and where we will be going from here. Before I give the floor to our distinguished speakers, let me just give some housekeeping rules. As per practice now, the best practice is to keep us off the camera when we are not speaking, and of course muted all the time when we are not speaking. I would like to inform everyone that we are recording this session for the benefit of those that cannot join us at this particular time but would like to hear what was discussed, and so we will be putting the recordings on the event page after the session. We will also put the presentation that speakers will use to the same event page. I will ask speakers to first present their presentation, and then I will turn to some of the very eminent experts that are joining us in the webinar through as participants to perhaps make some first initial comments, and then we will be going through the questions and comments that other participants are going to share with us in the chat box. So you have in the platform you have chat, and kindly put your questions, comments in the chat. If we have time, we will ask for you to come on the screen and ask verbally. If not, I will quickly summarize the comment and ask on your behalf. I think this is all from me. I have spoken for too long as usual, and so let me give floor to Shin and Helen to take away this webinar. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mia, for the glamorous introduction, and we'll do our best to match your expectations, okay? First of all, welcome everyone to this webinar on the post-globalization value supply chain movement. I'm Hyodok Shin, a faculty member at Rady School of Management in University of California, San Diego. Helen Wang is a CEO of WCG Group and the Vice Chair of Institute for Supply Chain Excellence and Innovation. To begin with, I wish that everyone is safe and well under this challenging time of the pandemic. COVID-19 exposed us to enormous challenges, in particular in the area of value supply chains. However, bigger challenges come always together with greater opportunities. Specifically, we noticed that in addition to the trade wars and geopolitics, the pandemic accelerated the rebalancing of the value supply chains, which actually initiated this industry research project. And this project is the result of substantial collaboration with many experts and stakeholders, and we could not have done it without their support. So in particular, we would like to thank all of the industry executive leaders who generously share their time, knowledge, and experience with us through numerous interviews and surveys. We would also like to recognize our students at University of California, San Diego. This project is the product of their hard work with so many sleepless nights. With that, let me tell you the agenda of this talk. Okay. So first, we will start briefly introduce our institution and ourselves, myself and Helen, followed by project overview. We will then share the findings of our phase 1 research. Next, based on the analysis, we will then share the findings of phase 1 research and conclusions and the predictions. And then we will move on to a final predictions and the discussions. Okay, hold on. Next, I would like to briefly discuss UC San Diego first. Helen and I are associated with Institute for Supply Chain Excellence and Innovation at Rady School of Management in University of California, San Diego. UC San Diego is one of the 10 campuses within the University of California system, which is one of the top public schools. And also UC San Diego, it has a unique location in a beautiful La Jolla campus, which is actually pretty close to the next Mexico border within a 1-hour drive distance. So that is one of our key differentiator for the University of California, San Diego. And I am associated with the Rady School of Management, which is a relatively new business school within UC San Diego, less than 20 years old. It is also known for its entrepreneurship focus, and that has been the focus and the root of the Rady School. And within Rady School, there is Institute for Supply Chain Excellence and Innovation, founded by Jimmy and Calceria, in which we have great industry board of advisors, executives, and thought leaders who helped us substantially for this project. Okay. Now, let me introduce myself briefly. as Mia said, I'm a faculty member at Rady School and a faculty director for the Institute for Supply Chain Excellence and Innovation. My key research area is in the value supply chain, in particular focusing on the 3 I's. First, innovation. Second, inclusiveness. And the third, information. Right? In terms of innovation, I have studied how to bring innovation to the market, leveraging the relationship with the suppliers. That is supplier-enabled innovations, right? And in some cases, it can also improve the inclusiveness. So that is one of my research focus, and I would love to talk more about it, but and for the interest of time, let's move on. And that's about me. And before we move on to Helen, I would like to add that while I'm coming from academia, Helen is coming from industry. And actually, Helen's whole career was through the era of globalization and then to post-globalization. With that, Helen.
Thank you, Dr. Shane. So as Dr. Shane mentioned, as an industry practitioner from the high-tech industry, I am fortunate to work for 3 innovative companies. So my professional journey started with Foxconn's large-scale manufacturing in Southern California. We did the final assembling and test for PC and Mac computers there. 2 years later, I joined Apple and helped deliver the first generation of iPhone. After developing Apple's global supply chain for more than 8 years, I went to Google X, the moonshot factory within Alphabet. When my engineering friends created new radical technologies to solve some of the world's biggest problems, my team's mission was to design and develop the future value supply chain system. We helped bring a range of breakthrough technologies to the world, including self-driving cars, smart glasses, internet balloons, and energy kites. Technology played essential roles in our lives and empowered me to dream big, work hard, and see the future. So everybody knows the story of Apple and Google. However, not many people know what happened to the large Foxconn factory in Southern California. If you would make a guess, what might be your answer? Please look for clues and think about your answer throughout the presentation. We will revisit this question at the end. Now you know who we are and where we come from. Let's move on to the project. In the next section, I will cover objectives, methodologies, and the research roadmap. So throughout my professional career, as Dr. Shi mentioned, most industry and companies have enjoyed the benefits of globalization and find no reason to make any change. After China joined the WTO in 2001, I joined Foxconn in 2003. Since then, I have enabled and witnessed the massive transition for outsourcing and offshoring and China's epic growth. Till recent years, when the United Kingdom began to withdraw from European Union in 2017, when the accumulated trade tension between US and China turned into a trade war in 2018, when the COVID-19 pandemic exposed the hidden risks within the existing value supply chain system, we were forced to pause and reevaluate the vision and the strategy. There is clearly a shift from globalization to something else. Moving forward, the US election will open a new chapter for the world. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, between Asia-Pacific nations, including China, but excluding India, will bring new dynamics into the global value supply chain system. When virtual meetings became the new norm, and in the middle of the pandemic, Project PGM was born. So PGM stands for Post-Globalization Movement. It is an industry research project that combines the intellectual powerhouse of research faculty, graduate students, and industry experts within UCSD's worldwide community. We have a few objectives. Number one, understand the value supply chain movement and predict emerging trends. Number two, utilize UCSD's research capability between multiple graduate schools to make a real impact. Number three, provide information, data, and thoughtful strategies to guide industries to make informative decisions. Finally, we work with a group of students each quarter. We hope to incubate future leaders by solving complex and real-world problems. Before we dive into the details, I thought it would be helpful to present the 3 steps methodology applied to this project. For the first phase of the project, we decided to focus on 4 countries. You can see their national flags on the top. From the left to the right, US, Mexico, China, and India. Since we couldn't find any existing methodology to solve the problem, the 5D framework was developed to measure countries' competitiveness. 4 out of 5 dimensions are to address business environment. Starting from top line, reflects revenue and company's value proposition driven by customers. Moving to bottom line, that impacts earnings driven by cost. Hard power include infrastructure and trade policy managed by countries and the government. People and culture generate soft power. For each of these 4 dimensions, we developed a set of key attributes and found third-party data and index to quantify the impact. The 5th dimension is time, which is powerful by itself. In other words, companies will solve the same problem with different strategies in the short term, mid-term, and the long term. Okay, it sounds like a simple idea, but does it work for a complex problem like PGM? Let me direct your attention to the bottom line and do a quick demo of the 5D model in the case of China. Since lower cost is one of the primary benefits and driving force for globalization, I will start from the bottom line and go through a complete cycle clockwise. To begin the cycle, China utilized its cheaper labor cost to attract supply chain companies' relocation. That's the bottom line. After joining WTO in 2001, China strengthened its hard power through free trade agreements and decades of infrastructure improvement. That's hard power. Through outsourcing and offshoring, foreign investment brought job opportunities, international talents, and prosperity to particular regions within China. These regions developed as a supply chain clusters. As a result, income and GDP growth improved the top line. Furthermore, the supply chain clusters incubated and transformed the local talent. Soft power, including human capital and working culture, made China hard to compete. Well, we just finished one cycle. Now, with the increased labor cost and trade tensions between the US and China, what's next for China? Will history repeat? I think we might have more questions than answers at this point. Next, I would explain how we define the global supply chain system. In short, we call it the VSC system. There are 3 layers in the system. The first layer is the center triangle, which covers every company, business, and industry worldwide. It forms a long and continued chain from the bottom to the top, including raw material, components, sub-assembly, subsystem, system integrator, and the final products and services. The second layer, including connectors, like logistics and transportation, as well as service providers throughout the VSC system. The third layer is the largest triangle that describes the value creation from ideas to product and the supply chain integration from upstream to downstream. Together, the VSC system includes the flow of trade, creation of value, and an end-to-end supply chain ecosystem. Many industry-leading companies around the globe helped us in Phase 1 project. I want to thank all the executives who have supported us. We have a great representation of companies within the VSC system. However, to simplify the analysis, we grouped them into 3 business categories based on company specializations. Manufacturing company provide production services and related technology to product companies. Product companies specialize in product design and IP creation and outsourcing their manufacturing if needed. Service companies provide non-manufacturing services such as logistics. In addition to business categories, companies further differentiate themselves from capital investment to labor intensiveness and IP strategy. When it comes to the roadmap development, we share the spirit of entrepreneurship and plan our project every quarter. Unlike conventional research projects, we move fast like startups and demand tangible deliverables each quarter. For example, during the summer of this year, we created a 5D framework. This quarter, we used the Phase 1 of the project to prove the concept. As the next step, we will apply the learnings to improve and optimize the model. About the project focus areas, we started Phase 1 with 4 countries and decided to deep dive into Mexico VSC system next quarter. Meanwhile, we are evaluating potential ideas for spring quarter. So if you are interested to participate in the Phase 2 Mexico VSC system project, please let us know. And at the end of the webinar, we would like to conduct a survey to get your thoughts about interesting subjects related to PGM in the future. With all the background information, we're ready to dive into details of the Phase 1 project. I would like to invite Dr. Shane to lead the next few sessions. Dr. Shane.
I think you have to unmute yourself, Shin. I think we... Shin, please go on.
Somehow, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, it's strange that when I don't do anything, somehow it blocks me. Okay, so let me share the screen again and let's start. Okay, let's restart. Okay, and then let's go to this. Okay, can you hear me now with the screen?
Screen is visible and we can hear you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Sorry for the glitch. So let's move on to the findings of the Phase 1 research. We will present first benchmark analysis comparing the 4 focus countries as Helen described: China, India, Mexico, and US, along the 4 dimensions in the 5D model, which is bottom line, top line, hard power, and soft power across the time. And then finally, we will do the SWOT analysis. And the SWOT analysis is based on the surveys and interviews with the industry experts, while the benchmark analysis is based on the quantitative indices and literature surveys through which we also validate the result of the SWOT analysis. Right? So let's start with the benchmark analysis. specifically the bottom line first, right? So for the bottom line benchmark analysis, we picked one example, the printed circuit board assembly industry, and compared the total landed cost from different countries targeting the consumer market in the United States. First, why did we pick PCBA industry? Right? To begin with, the printed circuit board is a common basic product in multiple industries, including electronics, auto, even oil and gas and equipment. It also shares similar characteristics with many other industries. For example, it shares a similar process with other industries, including not only manufacturing, but also testing. It shares similar technologies as well, in addition to similar cost components and structures, including CapEx and labor with many other industries. Now, when we compare total landed cost of the same circuit board manufactured in 4 different countries for the consumer market in the United States, it reveals the substantial impact of tariffs and duties, which is what you see on the right side of the graph. Right? As we expected, India and Mexico have relatively low landed cost compared to the United States. What is interesting is the case of China. For China, it has still lower landed cost compared to US without the tariff. However, once we add 25% tariff, the landed cost from China becomes even 8% higher than the United States. So this is the current landed cost comparison. Now let's look at specific cost components over time, starting from the labor cost. First, the graph on the left shows the wage growth comparison from 2005 all the way to 2019, normalizing the price level to the level of 2005 as 100. Orange color represents the United States and the blue color, China. As you can see, over the past 15 years, the wage growth in US was relatively stable. However, the labor wages grew much faster in China at the same time. In addition, although it's not in the graph, Mexico's case is similar to US and India's case is similar to China with a bit slower speed. Right. Next, shown in that right-hand side graph as a product producer price index, the electronics component prices have been slowly decreasing overall in the past 15 years. Lastly, looking into the short-term future of the next 5 years, we expect that similar trajectories of the past to be continued both in terms of the wage growth and component prices, meaning the wage growth rate in China will be higher than US and an increase in labor cost will be counterbalanced by the decrease in component prices. So this is the bottom line benchmark analysis. Let's move on to the soft power benchmark analysis. Now, for the soft power benchmark analysis, I would like to remind you that soft power is related to talents and culture. The key attributes of the soft power are social network, working culture, innovation, critical talent, communication, business ethics, and IP protection. We are comparing those attributes with corresponding specific metrics across 4 focus countries: United States, Mexico, India, and China in that vertical order. I would like to point a few attributes here. Let's start with the social network, measured by number of clusters in top 100 social networks in each country. As you can see here, US has 25 clusters in top 100 social networks, whereas China has 17. In contrast, India has only 3, and more surprisingly, Mexico has none. In addition, if we look at the critical talent, in particular measured by the percentage of the college-educated talent pool, US is 25%, but China is even higher than US, 28%. These contrast with Mexico's 3% and India's only 13%. So in many attributes of the soft power, United States and China lead, and Mexico and India follow from behind. It does not mean that China has the great soft power in all attributes. In some attributes, like IP protections and ethics, China is lagging behind compared to the United States. Lastly, I want to reiterate that the soft power is related to the culture, which means it takes actually a very long time to build up. And China's lead on the soft power is the result of over 3 decades on strategic investment. Now, we looked at the soft power benchmarking. Next, we'll move and look at the hard power benchmark analysis. Okay. So for the hard power, the key attributes are trade policy, infrastructure, logistics, government program, access to the technology, and environment, social, and corporate governance compliance. As before, we will compare those attributes across 4 focus countries. I want to highlight trade policy measured by number of free trade agreements and infrastructure. As you can see in both categories, China is leading, followed by the United States. India is lagging behind in infrastructure. Although Mexico has 13 free trade agreements and India has 14, at least Mexico has USMCA with the United States. Think about the India's case. Although it has 14, it does not even part of a RCEP with China, like Helen said. So even in that sense, India is lagging behind by far in terms of hard power. Now, let's look deeper into the binational trade policy, specifically with the United States. If you look at binational trade relationship with the United States for Mexico, China, and India, Mexico was the largest trading partner with the United States, followed by Canada, and then China was the 3rd largest trading partner with the United States in 2019. The difference between Mexico and China is that although the United States trading volume was slightly higher with Mexico than with China in 2019, the United States trade deficit was much larger with China. That is also another source of trade tensions between US and China. In addition, I like to point out that not only India has relatively small trading volume with the United States, but even with that small volume, India still suffers from increased trade tension with the United States. So overall, for the hard power, China leads, closely followed by the United States, and then Mexico follows from behind, and lastly, India has some catch up to do, specifically for infrastructure and trade policy front. With that, I would like to give some key takeaways from the benchmark analysis. From the bottom line benchmark analysis, the total landed cost was the highest from China, primarily due to tariff. We haven't discussed too much about the top line, which is related to customers. For example, customer market size, proximity to customers, ease of business, and reputation, also represented in this spider web diagram. The blue represents the United States, red, China, orange, India, and the last one, green, Mexico. And the outer the graph goes, the better the score. As we expected, US, the blue, and China, the red, lead in terms of proximity to customers and market size, simply because of a huge market size in US and China. The difference is that the United States leads on reputation, in which China happens to be even behind Mexico. However, interestingly, in terms of ease of business, China scores the highest, even higher than the United States among any countries that we look at. And next, in terms of hard power, with RCEP, China leads, followed by the United States. However, in terms of the soft power, the United States leads, in particular in communications and innovation. So this is the benchmark analysis along those 4 dimensions. Next, we will move on to the SWOT analysis. Now, for the SWOT analysis, we conducted SWOT analysis for each country separately from online surveys and interviews with industry experts. However, for the interest of time, instead of presenting SWOT analysis for each country, I will illustrate by choosing one country for each SWOT category. So let's start with strength. I will illustrate the analysis using India for strength. In this pie chart on the upper left corner, blue stands for bottom line, marked as B, green, top line, marked as T, gray, soft power, marked as S, and orange, hard power, marked as H. And the size of the pie represents the number of times separately mentioned during the interview with the industry experts. So in India's strength was recognized as in the order of bottom line first, the most, and then soft power, hard power, and lastly, top line. Specifically, low labor cost as bottom line strength, and talent, labor force as a soft power strength, and then IP protection as the hard power strength. Right? That's the India's case for the strength. Next, let's move on to the bottom left for the weakness. Right. I will illustrate the weakness using the China example. As you expected, the biggest weakness is China's increasing cost in bottom line, marked in blue with B, and IP protection in hard power. It's actually quite interesting to see the competitiveness and contrast between India and China. For example, IP protection and low labor costs are India's strength, while those two components are exactly the weakness of China. Next, let's move on for the opportunities on the upper right corner. Across the countries, first of all, most opportunities were driven by market-related top-line factors, such as proximity or access to growing markets, which is what we also see in the case of Mexico. Another opportunity of Mexico is coming from Mexico's existing competency in soft power, in particular industries like automotive. So one way to realize this opportunity for Mexico is to utilize this soft power competency in the existing automotive industry that's already accumulated for the past 3 decades and build upon and expand it to the other industries. Now, the last one for the threats on the left, on the right bottom. Across all countries, the threats were driven mostly by hard power concerns like trade tensions, which is also illustrated in the case of United States. Considering the proximity between US and Mexico and trade tensions between US and China, we believe that Mexico can be a great value supply chain partners with the United States. So that is the SWOT analysis. Now let me briefly summarize the outcomes of the SWOT analysis. Okay. First, we will say United States is an innovation leader, and Mexico, leveraging its proximity to US, has a great trade potential, especially with the United States. And China has been an all-around performer, and India has large untapped potential capacity. Specifically, looking at that North American market, the United States has strongest soft power with the growing consumer market in the top line. If Mexico develops midstream manufacturing hub, putting more value-added supply chains, seamlessly integrating with the United States, it can create great trading partnership with the United States. Now, on the Asian Pacific opportunity side, China and India are competitive to each other, with China being the dominant global supplier with persistent manufacturing edge, while India having tremendous latent potential capacity but challenged by the weakness of infrastructure and government red tapes. This is the key takeaway for the SWOT analysis, and based on the benchmark analysis and the SWOT analysis, we move on to the conclusions followed by the predictions. So now for the conclusions, first, we would like to touch upon the impact of COVID-19. COVID came with big challenges, including reduced labor availability, potentially due to remote working and even in some cases shutdowns, resulting in increased operations costs and decreased sales. It exposed all industries to substantial global risks, including the labor force, logistics industries, and greater risk of single sourcing. However, there were some surprising opportunities as well, including increased sales in some industries, in particular in the technology sector, leveraging intellectual properties and the digital transformation. Indeed, COVID accelerated trends like digital transformation and post-globalization value supply chain rebalancing. In addition, the exposure to the global risk like COVID pandemic brought urgent and more attention to the resilience. It is the first global pandemic of our era, but we all know that it won't be the last. Pandemic is one. Climate change can be another one, and on and on and on. Then the next question is, what can we do to mitigate the risks and how to achieve more resilience? That's a complicated, hard question to answer. So before answering that question, let's first look at what industry has been done to address this question. As I discussed previously, we classified industry sectors into three different categories: product, manufacturing, and service sector. We will look at their observed responses to address the issue of resilience with respect to the increased exposure to substantial global risks. Let's start with the product sector, which is mostly top-line customer-driven and has dominant US and China market. In the product sector, companies tend to outsource their manufacturing. So in response to global risks like COVID, they push the sourcing diversity to their manufacturing partners. Many of them are currently in China. Specifically, we observed that companies in the product sector request or, again, push China Plus strategy to their manufacturing partners to achieve their sourcing diversity. Now, driven by their customers' request, some companies in the manufacturing sector rebalance their value supply chains from China to Southeast Asia, including Vietnam, Malaysia, and Taiwan. And different industry sectors have different clusters in those countries. For example, Vietnam being a very similar to China with similar industries, but small. Malaysia, for example, a cluster of an aerospace industry, and Taiwan in semiconductor. Noticing this increased risk exposure and urgency together with this trend, other companies in the manufacturing sector implemented China Plus strategy themselves, which became an advantage for them to attract and pull more customers from the product sector. Lastly, for the service sector, it's a dominant US market, and there's not much need for the value supply chain rebalancing or movement. And we also did not observe much value chain movement either in this sector. What we observed instead is more on the technology upgrade, including digital transformation, more wide use of online space for services, getting closer to customers. So now that's the observed movement. With that, we want to move on to the future related to the future movement of the value supply chains. So far, we discussed along the four dimensions of bottom line and top line, hard power and soft power in three different industry categories of product, manufacturing, and services. In terms of the future movement of value supply chains, we would like to add a different business functions. For example, depending on whether it is headquarters versus R&D centers versus manufacturing sites, companies may have different key attributes to consider for their future location movement. So through online surveys, we asked industry leaders to rank the attributes that they consider for their future location movement of their corresponding functions. As you can see, those attributes are the same attributes that we used for our 5D model in benchmark analysis, as well as in our SWOT analysis. In these tables, double circle represents highest priority attributes. One circle is intermediate priority, and an empty cell being low priority attributes. And here, S represents soft power attributes, T, top line, H, hard power, and B, the bottom line attributes. In addition to the three different business functions, headquarters, R&D center, and manufacturing, we also classify business sectors into 3 different categories of manufacturing, service, and product as before. Now, what we found is that for both headquarters and R&D centers, the highest priority attributes are all soft power related across most industries. For example, for headquarters, talent and social network are the highest priority attributes, and R&D centers, again, talent and innovation in the soft power area. In contrast, in the business function of manufacturing, still the bottom line attribute, the cost, is the highest priority. Other priorities that matter is mostly in the hard power area, including trade policy, infrastructure, and government incentives. Now, based on this analysis for those future location factors, we would like to go deeper into the problem to understand the emerging trend in order to formulate a strategy before moving on to the predictions. Okay. The one key challenges that we have seen is a trade-off between cost efficiency and resilience. And this trade-off has been even in the past, but COVID exposed the risk in a greater degree with an urgent manner. First, how can we achieve that cost efficiency? One way to address them is, to your right, to have supply chain clustering. For example, having the whole cluster of supply chains around China and Southeast Asia improves cost and efficiency. Next then, how can we improve resilience? The challenge is on the left side. One way to achieve that resilience is getting close to customers, the proximity to market, which is on the right-hand side. It improves the speed and flexibility, through which improves resilience as well. In addition, due to the increased exposure to global risks like COVID, the importance of diversification became even bigger. What we mean by diversification is not at a company level, but on the country level, considering in particular the hard power component factors like trade policies. Finally, how to address that diversification in a country level, considering supply chain clustering and proximity to customer market. Our answer to that question is the regionalization of the supply chains, meaning we will have supply chain clusters in China and Southeast Asia targeting Chinese market, and another value chain clusters around North America, including United States and Mexico, serving the United States customer market. So in that sense, we will see the emerging strategy of global regionalization of the supply chains, which is reinforced by the emerging trend of trade policies. Now with that, we are ready to go into our specific predictions. Helen.
Great, thank you, Dr. Shane. I think this is the moment that we all be waiting for. And before I reveal that our prediction, I would like to point out that our predictions consider the following key assumptions that typically are out of control from the industry and the companies. We assume similar challenges, conditions, and outlooks related to trade relations, frictions, and barriers. We also assumed higher risk associated with climate change and a pandemic-like crisis. So based on above assumptions and the conducted analysis, the following prediction utilized the fifth dimension of the framework, which is the time. Firstly, while China is doing a great job to remain competitive and continuously grow its capacity, the China Plus strategy is happening now and will continue in the next few years. Southeast Asia countries will benefit from this rebalancing opportunity. Secondly, our midterm projections lead to Mexico and India. While the business environment is changing more rapidly than ever, these are tough decisions to make. I will discuss further in the next slides about these two countries. Lastly, we think the US has a real chance to be one of the long-term contenders for the upstream value supply chain, enabled by technology and innovation, and in partnership with Mexico. Lastly, Latin America and Eastern Europe are also present significant potentials. So about midterm contenders, because the dominant market in the US and China, Mexico and India are uniquely positioned to enable the regionalization model. Mexico, on the left-hand side of the slide, has a long history and experience of value supply chain system, such as automobile, aerospace, and electronics. It presents the best choice to improve resilience without sacrificing cost and efficiency. In addition to USMCA, maquiladoras, also known as twin plants, are manufacturing plants in Mexico with the parent company's administration facility in the United States. It's a government incentive program that allows companies to capitalize on the less expensive labor force in Mexico and receive the benefit of doing business in the United States. What is lacking from Mexico and must be developed are clusters for the social network and the clusters for supply chain system. In regards to India, it offers enormous potential for capacity expansion beyond China. It offers noticeable soft power, including education level, human capital, intellectual property protection, and the language. What needs to be improved in India is the infrastructure and the ease of business as well as trade relations. In conclusion, compared to the past 20 to 25 years of globalization and free trade conditions, the business environment is more dynamic, complex, and unpredictable than ever. On the one hand, the post-globalization movement requires industries and companies to better understand and stay vigilant in trade policies and tension in order to take a balanced approach between efficiency and resilience. In addition, develop a regionalization model to get closer to their customers to mitigate hard power related risks. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, post-globalization presents excellent opportunities for companies to expand their global footprint and become regional value supply chain leaders. Finally, the year 2020 is almost the end, and a new chapter is about to begin. This concludes our presentation today. Before we open for Q&A, Dr. Xing has a question for you.
Thank you, Helen. As Helen posed in the beginning, the question is, what happened to that Foxconn plant closed early 2000 from Southern California? It moved to somewhere else. And where will be that place? It could be China, it could be India, Mexico, or even different location in USA.
Okay, we will be posting a survey to answer in the chat box. People will be able to vote very shortly with that. I think if you click on the link here in the chat box, then you can choose which country you think the production has moved. And then we will give you the summary result after we collect all the votes. But meantime, thank you so much for the presentation. I think it covered many very interesting areas that we can sort of try to zoom in. But before I turn to the possible questions of participants, I would like to invite some experts from the region to perhaps give short comments based on their own research and how it compares to the findings here. So let me call first upon professor from Thammasat University, Pavida Panamnond. Pavida, if you are hearing me, can you please turn on your camera and take the floor?
Hello, everyone. Hello, Mia. Can you hear
Hi.
me? Hi.
Yes, I will just let me just ask maybe Dr. Shen to stop sharing the slides so that we can have the gallery on fully. Thank you.
Great. This also allows me to look at the
and for you to be seen as well. Okay, so Pavida, please, sorry for the interruption, and let me introduce you to everyone.
All right. Thank you very much, Mia, for having me to comment on this very interesting research. And thank you to Helen and to Dr. Shin for very interesting findings. I myself do also some research on the global value chain. And I think that our mutual interest in trying to understand how the post-globalization would affect the movement of supply chain or value chain, whatever we call it, very in common. And also we share a lot of common ideas toward regionalization and resilience. I find your research very interesting, and I think that I would like to share my two observations on perhaps your future stage of the research. First of all, I find that it's very interesting that you select all the 5D or 5G, was it 5G framework to analyze those different countries. But one thing that I think would be interesting also to complement your finding is more of a firm level decisions on relocations of supply chain. Because I think when we look at factors that are very much a macro country level, we would be kind of assuming that most industry would follow in that perspective. And whereas in reality, sometimes things may not be the case. And I refer to a survey that has been done by American Chamber of Commerce in China. And I think that they have done interesting survey asking companies what they think of their plan given COVID as well as given the US-China tension. And it turns out surprisingly that not that many companies are really thinking of relocating. They might be looking at China to keep their manufacturing there and at the same time perhaps looking for another place. And one reason for that is the sophistication and the depth of suppliers that they can find in China. So that's one of the factors that perhaps it can be integrated further into your framework rather than just a very broad macro, and that could be something that reflects more firms' interest as well as industry interest as well. And I just want to be short. And the second thing that I think would be interesting to discuss perhaps in your final research or final report is the methodology. Because I think that we already have a lot of model that looks at the competitiveness of countries. World Economic Forum does their global ranking of country competitiveness over the years. And I think in order to come up with another framework, perhaps it needs to be put in the context of why you think that this model is better than other existing models that we already have, and what kind of aspect that your model reflects and adds to in addition to those things. I think that is one interesting thing to point out. And another thing that I think would be worthy of reflecting is why you choose those 5 countries. Because if you look at theoretical underpinning of how we should be selecting countries, perhaps Southeast Asia would be a more interesting sample rather than India. I'm not saying that India is not interesting, but India is very much a country that you look at it as a market rather than part of the value chain that has already taken place within the Asia Pacific, mainly concentrating in East Asia and Southeast Asia. So I think those would be my 2 points to add to your already very interesting research, and thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pavida. And Shin, I'm going to come back to you immediately just to let you know that we have a number of questions and we have some commentators as well. So in replying to that, Shin, if I can sneak in a question from Albert Pisano, who is, hinting also back to some of the issues that Pavida raised, and I know my team also has. And he says, how do other factors such as perceived corruption, bribery in India affect your midterm predictions? Are you assuming such issues are in the process of being resolved? And I would add also that some of the findings that you recorded already in terms of environment, social governance, as a risk factor. So I'm giving floor to you, Shin, for a brief reply to this, and then I'm going to turn to the other commentator, and we have another question already waiting.
Great,
all right?
Great. Thank you very much, Mia. I'll just say one thing, and then I'll pass it to Helen to answer the rest of the questions. So one thing that I want to say, and to some extent clarify, is about our suggestion on China Plus strategy. Now, if we think about China Plus strategy, we are not saying, hey, so the value supply chains are moving out of China to other countries like India and Mexico. Definitely not. What we are saying is exactly, hey, the diversification is important, and many companies are thinking about China Plus strategy being, hey, China, we have one cluster of supply chains there. However, it can be risky, in particular, if we look at the angle of the trade policies. So let's move some stuff from China to one close to China, which is Southeast Asia, and potentially some others like Mexico and India. And exactly like Pravida said, the difficulty is we are not saying moving companies, right? The clustering is the key. So when we move, the difficulty of that supply chain rebalancing is it won't work if we just move one company to the others. It's got to be the whole value supply chain, right? That's why what we suggest in terms of the Mexico's strategy, in order to build up the value supply chain for Mexico's case, they cannot build up from ground zero. They have to utilize their existing sort of expertise in the clusters. For example, like Helen said, auto industry, aerospace, and electronics, they already have some clusters. So developing from those clusters and expanding it to others is exactly what we are suggesting because of that issue of hard task of moving the clusters, right? With that, I will let Helen to answer why we picked those countries of US, Mexico, India, and China, and the other issues that Mia asked.
Okay, so maybe I answered Al's question first regarding some of the issues that we have observed from India. I think the answer is there's just no perfect countries exist in terms of value supply chain. When we look at each country and they have their pros and cons, the SWOT analysis, benchmark analysis, the 5D model is tell the story about each country has their, the strength and the weakness. So some of the things we could take advantage, some of the things the country will have to work hard to improve. We're not saying that, the corruption, the things, the things that we're worried about India will go away. Well, I think in our prediction, the midterm contenders, I mentioned about they must work on ease of business and as well as the trade tensions from India's perspective. And we hope, to discuss this kind of broad comparison at a country level even more. Because sometimes I feel like country might be looking too deep on themselves. And when they compare with, for example, India's case with China, I think something to learn from China, and they are also having something that they are having a solid, better foundation than China. So they should leverage and utilize that strength. And in terms of why do we pick this 4 country, I think in the recent years, I feel like we have more troublemaker than problem solvers. And the reason that I'm saying that because the US and China trade tension turns into a trade war has got all of our attention, right? And then this pandemic basically impact everyone's life. So centered that tension seems to be the biggest problem. And we thought it was as a first phase that we would choose the issues around China and the US. So India coming to mind because of the capacity potential, the population. We think that might be a midterm contenders for the China solution. And Mexico is obviously because of proximity to the US. So we think that would be a great thing to talk about in the North American market. So that's, did I miss something?
Thank you, Helen. Pavida, if you don't have an immediate comment, very quick on that, then I'll move to Anushka. I hope he's here. He can give us a little bit of inkling from what other countries may be thinking in this context. It seems that we are neglecting the middle-sized small countries altogether. Anushka from Sri Lanka.
Good morning, Mia, and good morning, everyone. Helen and Dr. Shin, thank you very much for that really enlightening presentation. And I think the one major contribution it makes is that there's a lot of existing literature and approaches that look at it from global production networks, global supply chains, plenty of literature on that. And this approach that you have put forward kind of follows the growing trend in taking a more systems approach that you see in other disciplines as well. And I think that's what makes it different. So there's I guess a whole other debate to be had on how this approach fits in alongside the GPN production sharing kind of approach. So I guess the reason Mia asked me to join also is because we recently did a study somewhat Sri Lanka focused, but also looking at the regional shifts as part of a Deloitte Consulting and USAID look. The primary focus there was, what's going on out there with the supply chain shifts, either the trade tensions or COVID, and how does it, what does it mean for smaller countries in the region that want to pick up some of this action? So I came from it from both the research perspective as an economist, but also having worked previously in the government, in the ministry that was tasked with trade and investment promotion. So some of the revelations in your study are very useful, even though I think the countries you use are the larger ones. A lot of the messages and findings that come out are very relevant. Let me share a couple of reflections from that, but also pose a few additional ideas. In the course of our research as well, where we spoke to a lot of global businesses, supply chain leaders, as well as manufacturers overseas to ask them some of the similar questions that you have also done, a very much similar story comes out on this idea of efficiency versus resilience. And I think there's a very distinct and noticeable shift happening where, and it's also part of whether it's the China Plus strategy or a sourcing diversification, risk diversification, where firms are now willing to look beyond the narrow limits of cost efficiency that they were ruthlessly focused on before, and which is essentially is what you call the bottom line, and increasingly willing to consider a slight cost premium if it brings them resilience. And resilience means different things to different companies, but that's what it is. So that's something I want to confirm we found out in our work as well. The comment I would make, and this reflects perhaps on how countries like ours would need to look at it. You mentioned in the hard power component, primarily using the pillar of, in the pillar of trade policy within the hard power component, it was primarily focused on number of FTAs. And I think that that's something that would be useful to dig in deeper. Perhaps also because the kind of industries that we think about in this space, automotive, components, electronics, aerospace, and so on, a lot of the trade openness indicators, trade facilitation, border efficiency matters a lot to those clusters. And I think it might be useful to also go beyond the number of FTAs as the trade policy pillar to look at some of these as well that overall influence the trade openness, trade efficiency. The other point also to make is, in the future location factors slide, I think it was very interesting to see headquarters versus R&D versus manufacturing. And it was in manufacturing that primarily trade policy came out as a strong one. But again, it might be interesting to unpack that because increasingly we're seeing much deeper, more comprehensive trade agreements, which include services chapters, investment chapters, technology cooperation, IP protection, and so on, which directly influence R&D, headquarters decisions, and so on. So that will be also very interesting to look at whether, from the, oh, sorry, that's my dog. From the perspective of those in attracting headquarters businesses or R&D, I feel that sometimes when we speak to businesses, speak to private sector leaders, they often don't understand the distinction between a plain vanilla FTA and a more deep and comprehensive FTA. So it takes a bit of time to explain to them that, when we talk about trade policy, it also means other parts, not just goods trade. So perhaps when we ask these questions from business leaders, we might need to dig in a bit deeper so that they understand that trade policy might actually matter for your R&D or headquarters decision. So this is something that came out in our work as well, because in countries like Sri Lanka, we haven't done much on that comprehensive side, and we're seeing that affecting the ability to attract R&D centers or headquarters businesses as well. So I'll end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anushka. And because of the time, let me go also to pick up another question, and then I'll go back, Helen, to you and Shen. So if Hin Hoon Lee is still with us, yes, hi.
Hi, I'm here.
Yeah, we have only 2 minutes, so let's keep it short because we want to give last 2 minutes to the speakers.
I have
yes.
2 comments, 1 minute.
Yes.
I'll try.
Okay.
So I'm an economist, by the way. Recently I just published a book on this issue with a title of Post-COVID Asia. And the subtitle is Deglobalization and the Fourth Industrial Revolution and Sustainable Development. Having said that, I'd like to just make a very brief comments on your very impressive, interesting, informative presentation today. First of all, actually, when it comes to the strength or the competitiveness of any country with regard to investment or trade or global value chain, you just picked 5 main components. But I feel that there should be one more, which is actually financial development level, financial market development, including financial market opening. I think that is very much important, actually, very integral to the competitiveness of any country with respect to trade, investment, and global value chain. Secondly, actually, I was very much interested in your presentation. Actually, before I just began to attend this very interesting seminar, because I'm really keen to hear from you about what will really happen to the global value chain, okay, in the post-COVID era. Actually, but you are just talking about just a rebalancing of global value chain from China to the neighboring countries in Asia or to Mexico or to some other countries. But when it comes to rebalancing, my feeling is that it should be more than that. It's not just about the reshoring. Actually, with now the fourth industrial revolution in place, okay? now we are now entering totally new era of globalization, meaning that now, so far, the globalization, is just like the global value chain, which is very much, just a unidirectional from the producer to the consumers, particularly in manufacturing sector. Service sector has been just added as an extra, okay? But now with AI, artificial intelligence, big data, cloud computing, and e-commerce, and fintech, and more, actually the global value chain is now becoming totally different. Now it should be more like bi-directional. If we just think of it as just two-dimensional one, but I feel it should be more than that. Actually, now we have consumers who are actually adding their requests, okay, for their
Thank you,
product.
thank you, thank you, Mr. Lee.
It should be more than just two-dimensional. It should be three-dimensional. Okay, I think because of time, I'll stop here.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'll just send you an email with more of my comments in detail later.
Please do, and leave us in the chat the reference for your book. Will be very interesting to read it and to promote it. Thank you so much for that, and apologies for having to interrupt, but we need to give some time to Helen and Shin to respond to these really good comments. I think you have collected. I think there were questions also on the chat about differentiation between product and manufacturing. That was perhaps not very clear. And then also the reliance on the World Bank ease of business, which has been proven as not really reliable anymore. So how do you plan to replace that source of data, etc.? I think, there are further questions that I have gotten, but in your response also, can you reveal to us what is the correct answer to the poll question? Because we didn't get the voting still, and we are keen to know. So thank you. 1 minute, if you can, each, that will be great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mia. I will just say thank you all for the great comments. And again, sorry for this lack of time. If you have any questions, we'll be very happy to answer those questions through emails. And I will leave that 1 minute to Helen by pointing out that for Helen, the answer from the audience was that 2/3 said Mexico and a 1/6 said China, another 1/6 said a different location in USA, and there was a few who said India. With that, Helen.
Yeah, so the answer back then was actually after I left Foxconn, the factory was actually moved to Tijuana, Mexico. And I would also like to thank everybody's question and comments. And I'm actually quite excited about those questions, especially the question about why this 4 country. And we just get started. So this is a phase 1 choice. And in the future, we would love your help to guide us to where the high demand is. Where do you feel like we should spend our time and energy looking into the post-globalization movement? We welcome your feedback and suggestion as well. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Helen and Shin. I think much more, as you said, can be discussed and debated in this. This is an ongoing discussion. I think, Mr. Lee, obviously, the more than one dimension, definitely, because what we are recognizing is really the maturity of consumers as well, and demand for a different behavior of anchor firms, but also everyone else. And when we go from the bottom to the top line, definitely something will have to change in between. And I think this rebalancing is about that as well. With that, I really appreciate the discussion, and I think we can keep it going. Please contact ARTNeT at UN.org if you want to engage into the project, and we will definitely continue working together on this, because it is on my part, I'm really keen to see how we can continue integrated smaller countries indirectly in these clusters, because one of the disadvantages of these is smallness of their national markets, and if they don't have access to the other markets, then obviously their sustainable development will be impacted, because both on the import and export side they will be having lesser choices for the sustainable development. So with that, let me simply thank everyone, but of course most Helen Wang and Shin for their excellent presentation, for this project, for bringing this project to us here, and we are looking forward to be working with them. I also want to recognize great help of Chenavan Ning, who was working with us to put it logistically. Yes, and we hope next time we meet in this, if in this platform we will have even more features in MS Teams, so that we can actually enjoy more interactivity through the polls and everything else. It's in the making. I think it's getting there. Let me also wish you safe and joyful festive season. Merry Christmas to people that celebrate, and I think happy and less challenging New Year is all that we want for this end of year and looking into the next. So thank you so very much, and I hope you will stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.